Some founders have this magic where investors light up and instantly buy into their vision, whilst others get stuck explaining details that don't really matter. And it just feels like a constant uphill battle just to make investors say yes. And the real question for you is, why is that? What makes those founders find it so easy to fundraise? And from sitting on both sides of the table as a VC-backed founder where I raised $16 million and also as a tier one VC, I've realized a lot of the time it's how you structure your investment story. So in this video, I'm going to show you the three-phase system that gets investors genuinely excited about your present, the vision of your business, and whether they'll actually want to invest into you in the end. And I know how hard fundraising is. So if you want to get free AI tools that actually help you build your own system, then comment AI down below to get it, or look at the link in the description. I want to show you why this matters so much so that you don't make the same mistake as 99% of founders who end up failing to raise. And that is assuming that investors know as much as you do about your world, your industry, the future you're trying to create, because you are so connected to your business and you work on it every day. But the problem is, no one else is apart from the other competitors that you have, especially when it comes to investors. Let me use myself as an example. When I was a VC, I was actually specialized in health. That didn't mean I spent every day in every single industry, at every single type of company. I had my own views, sure, and whether they were right or wrong. But if a founder treated me like the expert and didn't show me what they were doing mattered so much, I'd usually miss what actually made their company exciting and usually would reject them after it as well. So even for me as a specialized VC, I didn't know as much as the founder and I needed someone to handhold me. So think about it when they're not as specialized as I was. So when building your investment story, you need to make your story simple and clear so investors actually get it, even if they're totally new to your space. And I understand how hard that is when you're so ingrained in it, and I call it founder talk. But if you nail that, suddenly you're not confusing to investors, but you're rather making them want to jump in and spend more time with you. And this three-part system of how you build out your investment story does exactly that. So let's actually build out your investment story through these three different phases. And the first phase is really what sets up the story correctly without you having to jump into your product and solution and making it all confusing. So phase one, the best way to think about how to set up phase one is thinking actually about climate change of all things. Really think about it for a second. Why do people care about climate change? It's not just because someone says, hey, the climate is changing. It's because experts have got super specific about what that future will look like if the current world stays the same. Think of it like the flooded cities, the raging wildfires, the extreme weather events, people, their homes being destroyed. The more specific and extreme the picture, the more the future of climate change feels, and the more urgency to act has come from the global way of thinking. But if all we ever heard was, climate change may matter in the future, no one would care. No one would take action. And I want you to think about doing something similar when it comes to building out your own phase one in fundraising. Now, of course, it's not going to be as emotionally pulling as climate change. It doesn't have to be, and you don't want to force it onto it. But you need to make investors feel that visceral pain that your customers and industry have and actually want to take action on it. Because that's the only way you're going to make them hooked into actually want to spend time with you. But how do you do this yourself then? So I want you to start by painting a vivid picture of your customer's daily reality. So don't just describe the problem. I want you to make it real with customer stories. So share a day in the life story, highlight the frustrations, show what's at stake if nothing changes. Help investors step into your customer's shoes and feel the pain for themselves. You want them to really be thinking about, if we don't change this world, we don't change this industry, we don't change the problem that you're trying to solve, these are all the problems that are going to happen, and really make them feel that from the customer point of view. And when you do this, you're not just explaining your business anymore. You're making investors care in the same way that you did, because you could have done anything in the world, but you decided to fix this problem for your customer. And there's a reason for that, but you never talk about it. And you don't make investors understand that feeling. But once you do that, that is the foundation for a winning pitch. That is the foundation that makes investors excited to want to talk to you and excited to actually build that out. If you want to, show me your climate change version in the comments below, and I'll give you some feedback on whether or not it's good or bad or how to improve it. Now, once we've helped investors feel the pain of the current world, how do we then bring them to the finish line? Because that's only the start, that's the foundation. What does it look like to make them actually invest into you in the end? And that's really what phase 3 is all about. So phase 3. So when I first started working with Marwan, he had a major problem when speaking to investors. He was building in a pretty complex industry. He was helping build AI in healthcare and the infrastructure around it. And investors just couldn't get excited by what he was doing. And the biggest problem he was having is that investors just didn't understand how he was going to change his industry for the better, because Marwan couldn't show investors what that future looked like. What happened, and what I see a lot of founders do, is dive straight into his product only to get a hit with a barrage of questions. Why does this matter? Who cares? What's the real pain here? And he was losing investor meetings day by day. But when we switched how he talked about the future to setting the scene of what the current world looked like, and then how the future he will create being so much better and solving that visceral climate change level problem, suddenly investors went from doubting his business to feeling the urgency of Marwan's mission and got emotionally invested in what he was building, because they believed that he was the one that was going to change the future for the better. And what happened is that the conversation shifted from skepticism like before to genuine interest. And that's what allowed him to raise $4.5 million in the end for 2 different companies. And it's exactly the same when you're fundraising. If you just say the future will be better, and you don't set up stage 1 and stage 3 in the right way, investors will never be excited by your vision. But if you paint a vivid, detailed picture of what that future could look like with your solution at the center and you being the one that does it, suddenly investors can see it, they can feel it, and they can get excited that they're going to play a part in making it happen. And that's the crux of how you make them want to invest into you. So how do you do this? I want you to lay out the future world in high definition. So show what changes, who wins, who loses. What does a day in the life look like when your solution exists compared to phase 1? How is that changed from the current world? How do you play your part in that to make that a reality? I want you to make it so real that investors can't help but want to be a part of that story and make that transformation. And when you do this in the right way, suddenly you're not pitching a business anymore. Instead, you're inviting investors to shape the future with you, and you're making them want to be a part of that future. And the amazing part is, when you do this correctly, what happens is your conversations go from risks and the worries about it to how the investor can work with you to make your vision a reality. What things they think that you should be doing, what are the things you should be pushing and pulling. That's the emotional position we want to be in with an investor, and that's the highest chance of success that you're going to be able to fundraise. And pretty much every single investment I ever made as a VC, I had that exact feeling. So that's the feeling that we want to get to. Now, you may have realized that we actually skipped phase 2, didn't we? And there's a specific reason that we actually do that. So let's actually go over phase 2 now. Phase 2 is like telling someone about a road trip from New York to Los Angeles. If you start listing every single turn, every possible traffic jam, every gas stop, every type of thing you're going to be doing as that journey, people are just going to lose interest. Or worse, they're going to start worrying about all of the little things that could go wrong over the 5-day trip that it takes you to go from the east to west coast. But if you say something like, we're leaving New York and ending up on the beaches of LA and everything's sorted for you, suddenly everyone's picturing the finish line. They're excited about being in LA. They're thinking about how they can make that journey better and helping and doing that. And that's really where phase two can get messy. Phase two is all about how you get from the painful present of phase one to the exciting future of phase three. And this messy middle is where founders go wrong, because you spend all your time wanting to dive into phase two. And I totally get why you do. It's where you sit every day. Focusing on phase two, on how you get from phase one to phase three, as a founder, building a business is how you're going to actually succeed. I totally get that. And that's why it's so hard. And that's why you spend so much time on it and you go into that mode. But if you do this with investors, suddenly you're stuck in the weeds. There are a million different ways to get from phase one to phase three. And every path comes with its own risks, doubts, questions. And what happens then is investors start poking holes. They start getting lost in the details. They start tinkering with what's going right or wrong and the risks. And before you know it, the conversation is all about what could go wrong instead of what could go right. This happened all the time when I was a VC. And when this happened, I stopped caring. And when I look back as a VC-backed founder, the investors that I ended up not raising with, I was always talking about phase two. And they stopped caring about the future and couldn't get past all the problems. That is inevitable. You're all going to have problems at such early stages of businesses. So we don't want to be talking about the inevitable things that are wrong with you, but rather, what does the future look like and how do you solve it and how amazing is it going to be if they're part of that? So that's why when you show investors the pain of today and the promise of tomorrow, of the things you're trying to do and the size of your company and what the investor's going to get out of it after, you let them fill in the blanks for phase two, because that way they're going to start to focus on the impact you're going to create, not just the obstacles in the way. This is the true secret to making your story believable and inspiring and allowing you to fundraise for your business. So I don't want you to get bogged down in the how. That can come out later on, but don't get bogged down to the how to start with. Just focus on the transformation from where things are now to where they could be. That's what gets investors excited to join you on the journey and to make sure these phases work in unison and in the right manner to get your startup funded. But how do you make sure you're actually saying the right things when an investor asks you questions then? Well, check out my next video where I go through exactly how to objection handle investors with a 3-step process.